or is it more a red territory?
I don't know. I know. There's been stories of the last year. I've heard stories that the police have been stopping drivers and asking them to pray. Have you guys heard those stories? I've heard that on some other podcasts, but I know there's a big Roman Catholic element to Puerto Rico. And
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but but they're more progressive than them, right?
So is whose son? Repeat yourself. Italy. Okay.
You know what I mean? So,
I thought you said dick. Okay, anyway, come on.
You cold?
So let's go to China, where after a crackdown on a popular gay-themed Chinese drama, censors in the TV, radio, and film industry have now banned all TV programming depicting gay and lesbian couples. According to BuzzFeed, the report says the China Television Drama Production Industry Association and the China Alliance of Radio, Film, and Television introduced guidelines prohibiting, quote, abnormal sexual relationships and sexual behavior, end quote.
Can I interject real quick on this one? I thought in China I had watched a Vice documentary and another documentary saying because of the fact that there's so many more males than there are females, that a lot of the males had, and I hate to say this because you're born gay, but had turned to coupling with other males because of the fact that there aren't enough women to go around. Is this not the case?
I don't know.
If it was the case in a society like China, who are like kind of like a bastardized version of communism, they have sort of a capitalist economy with a communist social structure. I wouldn't think that homosexuality would be such a big deal to a society like that. Like they don't have religion interjected in any. The state is the religion. So I don't understand where this would be coming from in a society like that.
Well, when I read on to the story,
sure, go ahead. Sorry,
I'm going to see there's some other so it's fine. But you'll see there's some other interesting things that the censors don't like. So, so the ban also includes depictions of incest, sexual assault, extramarital affairs, and, quote, witchcraft practices and feudal superstition and grotesque criminal cases, end quote.
So they've become superstitious.
So superstition seems to exist regardless of religion, at least in terms of the censors, what they're targeting to censor from the media.
Shit, that means Macbeth is completely out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the witches, right?
And you would have to say that their communism, even their societal and governing communism, isn't as pure as, say, Russia of the 70s and 80s.
Is it because it is so, sorry to be dumb.
No, go ahead, son.
But is Buddhism recognized by the government in China?
No, I think they do everything that they can to squash Buddhism.
Oh,
and that's kind of the reason why they're always fucking with the Tibetans.
From what I gleaned from the story, it stems from the same narrative of protecting the children and protecting children from influences, just like Russia, right? Those anti-gay laws against gay propaganda. It seems to be in the same narrative. It's not overtly religious, but there's this narrative that gay people corrupt children, and if we expose them to these influences, then the children are going to grow up to be gay or lesbian.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, David, or maybe if our guest would know this, but I don't remember, and I was obviously a small child, I don't remember back in the 80s when Russia was at its highest, the same amount of anti-gay rhetoric coming out of Russia as it is now. Maybe that's because the media was a lot more censored back then, and obviously Canada and the US had Russia relations were at their worst and we all hated each other, that we weren't getting this. But it seems to me that at this day and age, Russia is more anti-gay than it was back then. Am I wrong about that thinking, or?
Well, we definitely see with Putin's government the resurgence. It's not the communism of the Soviet Union where now we have the Russian Orthodox Church rising in power along and being cradled along with this system in Russia. So,
and Shujin, do you have any?
I wasn't nearly as interested at the time because of my youth with the news of the day that way. However, that being said, I think, and this is hazy at best, I think it's gotten. Here's the thing. I don't think that it's necessarily a re-rise of the old guard, so to speak, of the religion, so much as it's the totalitarianism of the established government. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the warming of the Cold War, a lot of stuff happened that released a lot of freedoms that had been curtailed under the oppression of the Soviet Union. And now it's kind of like that pendulum swinging back, being shoved back, I guess is the best way of putting it. So the media is allowing stuff to get out much more because it's really hard to clamp down on that now in the information age. But is it worse now? I think it's going to be really hard to, without doing a lot of homework, I think it's going to be really hard to try and figure that one out. But no matter how you slice it, this just sucks.
So, yeah, I agree in part. Also, remember, Russia is also dealing with low birth rate issues, dealing with the economic consequences of all the sanctions, and all that. It all contributes to those factors that make gays people be a scapegoat.
So I can speak to the communism part of it from a personal experience, right? So having been born to Yugoslav parents and having lived my early portion of my life in Europe and visiting Yugoslavia 2 or 3 times a year to see my grandparents, I am well versed in how strict communism was, and Yugoslavia was quite the liberal bastion in the communist/socialist countries of the time. But I can remember as a child sneaking into Romania so that my parents could hand out Bibles, and they could have been killed, literally killed for treason for doing so. I also remember as a child going to Prague and Czechoslovakia back then, so now it's 2 countries, but at that time it was the one country. And Czechoslovakia was, honestly, in my opinion, the most grey country that I could ever describe to you. It was just, it seemed dark. And we went to church in Czechoslovakia where we had to go underground, under tunnels, to go to a secret place to go to church when I was a child. And I was born in Germany, and so I can remember going through the Berlin Wall. So I was born in West Germany at the time, and I can remember driving through to East Germany because we had the Yugoslav passport, so we could travel between the 2 countries easily, 2 factions easily at the time without a visa. And the minute you drove over into the communist part of Berlin, it was just deprivation. It was, honestly, you cannot describe it. And in those times, homosexuality rights would have been the last thing on the people's minds because they were so subjected to threat and terror. There was just, the government controlled them so much that fighting for your homosexual rights would just, it would have been death penalty stuff. Absolutely. You would have been killed easily. And so now you fast forward to where you've opened those societies significantly, and many have turned away from communism. And so the influence of modern quote unquote, human rights and understanding of sexuality is still being viewed at the same rate, I would say, as it was back then. The only difference now is that people are bucking the system, so it appears to be more virulent.
If I could, from what you're saying, going through the Berlin Wall, which means that this would have been pre-89, as I recall, if you don't mind to kind of colorize this in a little bit further, when were you born roughly? So I'm kind of trying to get a feel for.
I was born in 1973,
okay.
And I lived in Germany up until 1980.
Okay, to kind of put a little bit of color onto this also, when she was born, this would have been still when Vietnam was still kind of still going on, almost at its end. So over here in the U.S., there was still a lot of vitriol going on for that. And I have to imagine on the Soviet side, because part of that was kind of fueled and kind of, go ahead, fight them. Go ahead. I got to imagine that sentiment must have colored a lot of what was going on even so.
Oh, I would agree with that. In fact, the funny thing is that when you drive from back in the day when there was East and West Germany, when you used to drive from West Germany to the wall, it didn't seem dark or grey. Like the physical surrounding didn't seem dark or grey. It didn't seem like it was cloudy on that side of the wall. There was beautiful green trees and it was, a normal functioning healthy society. And the minute you drove through the wall, it was dark and gloomy. Like as a child, I can still physically remember the feeling of sudden heaviness of driving through those walls.
Forgive me for making it simplistic. It was night and day.
Oh, absolutely. It was the oppression there and in those communist countries is like nothing that anyone in the Western world can understand.
You can see it in the videotapes of North Korea.
Mm.
If you watch the Vice Guide to Travels, or you watch any of the stuff from North Korea, even on video, you can see it. As a child, growing up in Canada or the U.S., it was pretty much the same thing. We were completely against the communists. I grew up in a city that strategically was third to get bombed by Russia. So we had bomb sirens outside of our schools. They taught us to dive under the desk if the sirens went off. So we grew up not only hating the Russians, but fearing the Russians in the 70s and 80s. And I think the same thing is going on in North Korea today. And you can see it from the videos.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I'm sorry.
And the government absolutely pushed for procreating to create more communists. That was absolutely part of the foundation of the governments. So we all heard about those awful Romanian AIDS orphanages in the late 80s after the wall came down when Ceausescu was murdered and for being an evil dictator of Romania. We've all seen those images, and in Russia, in Yugoslavia, in Czechoslovakia, all of those countries, pushing the birth rate was absolutely part of the dogma of the government.
Yeah, now, kind of bringing this back onto point, back in the 70s and into the 80s, it wasn't until the 80s when here in the U.S. we had the, oh God, what the hell was it in New York City? The Stonewall riot? Stonewall, thank you. Oh, Stonewall riot. And that was the spark that really got things running here in the U.S. for trying to get gay rights established to really get things rolling. Now, being that the Catholic Church, even the Orthodox Church, all working off of the same manual, I have to imagine that in the repressive government with the religious backing, so to speak, I have to believe that at the time, gay rights